Good evening. I call to order the meeting of the Beaverton School District Budget Committee on May 28th at 5:45. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here this evening. The Budget Committee is made up of 7 school board members and 7 committee members from each zone. So will you please each share how long maybe you've served in the role if you've been here, or, well, actually, we'll just do roll call, I think, for that one. And actually, during roll call, we're going to ask you to share your name and how long you've served in the current zone, and we'll go in zone order. So Susan Greenberg is not yet here, but when she comes, we'll go from there. So Jessica, if we'll go down this way, so, yeah, welcome.
My name is Jessica McBride, and this is my first year on the Budget Committee, Zone 1.
And then let's just go down the row then. Yeah, go ahead, that'll be easier.
Melissa Potter. I am on the board and first year.
Sunita Garg, Zone 4. This is my third year.
Alok Mehrotra, I think second year.
Krista Billings, Zone 5. This is my third year.
Dr. Karen Perez, Zone 2, and this is my third year.
Brian Bean, Zone 2, this is my first year.
Heidi Echeverria, Zone 6, 8th budget season.
Ugonna Enyinaya, Zone 5, third year.
Justice Raji, Zone 6, first year.
Lisa Schultz, Budget Committee, Zone 7, third year.
Tammy Carpenter, School Board Member, Zone 7, first year.
So thank you, everybody, and welcome. Our first item of order, is the business of the election for today. So we're going to go first for the election of the Budget Committee Chair. Is there a nomination for a member to serve as a chair of this committee? Justice?
Yes, I'd like to nominate Heidi Echeverria.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations tonight for that? Okay, so we'll take a vote. All those in favor of Heidi being our chair, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. So welcome Heidi to being our chair. Jessica mentioned that we're going to move the chair next to this position. So we're going to have you and Brian switch, and we'll maybe switch your nameplates. And so now I will hand over the gavel to Heidi, and she will ask for our nominations for vice chair. And I feel like. Oh, sorry. Yes, we have one of our members online. Do you want to introduce yourself and your year? Sorry about that.
You're muted.
Oh, you're muted.
Diane McCartney, Zone 3, and this is my third year, my last year on Budget Committee.
Thank you, Diane. Thanks for your patience. And we'll just note that Susan Greenberg is here, and we're noting how many years we've been on the board.
On the board, I'm in my 11th year, and in Budget Committee, I think I'm in my 13th year.
So thank you, Susan. So Heidi, welcome as our new chair.
Thank you. Next up on our agenda is to elect our budget vice chair. I'd like to hear if we have any nominations for vice chair.
Chair Echeverria, did I say your name right?
Yes, you did.
I would be honored to put Dr. Lisa Schultz's name in for vice chair.
Okay.
Second.
And Susan just seconded that motion. So with no further ado, if we can have a show of hands and a yay for Vice Chair Lisa Schultz. Yes.
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 Okay. Passes unanimously, so we have Vice Chair as Dr. Lisa Schultz this year. Thank you. Next up on the agenda for tonight, we have our budget message from Dr. Gustavo Balderas. Superintendent, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate this committee's involvement and dedication to our kids and community as we go through another budget cycle. First I want to start off that we're really fortunate here in Beaverton to have the budget that we do have. The budget reserve that we have is not like other districts that you'll hear about in the papers locally or nationally. So we're very, very fortunate to be able to have and preserve what we have cared for so long. We were able to keep most of our ESSER-funded dollars and funds retained in funded positions that we retain our SIA in our general fund, in SIA or general fund, so something that we're really, really proud of. But we are deficit spending, so we don't have where the budget you're looking at is not a balanced budget. It's a deficit. We have a structural deficit. We're overspending 17 million, but we're really fortunate that we have a reserve to be able to offset that. And we will have plans in the future to be able to right-size that up. But again, that's why we have a reserve. That is why we're so fortunate to have a reserve here in Beaverton. We're using one-time dollars to offset the spending, and our goal is to assess these expenditures next year to be able to have more of a balanced budget as we start to slowly stair-step down from the structural deficit that we do have. As stated, a very caring community, passes bonds and levies, and that's something that we're incredibly proud of. We passed over a $700 million bond. We're building a brand new Beaverton High School, a new Raleigh Hills Elementary, as well as a operating levy that provides us close to 300 teachers to offset class size, because that's what this community cares about. We do feel for our other districts around the area. I think most notably those that are in the news, Portland Public and Salem Kaiser. Portland Public's cutting $30 million this year off their budget. We have another possibly $30 million next year. Salem Kaiser is roughly the same. And Salem Kaiser, they're reducing 400 staff members for next year, 400 staff members. And also repurposing 800 additional staff members. And for those people that have been here in Beaverton for a while, that is memories of 2011. Those are memories of 2011 when we had to restructure so many of our own staff members because of a failed levy. So that's something that is top of mind because these are our kids in Oregon. These are our kids in Oregon, and we deserve the equal education. And we're really, again, I'm blessed to be here in Beaverton to work in this district in such a caring community that educated my own two sons, but knowing full well that we do have a horizon that's not pretty. That's why we need to continue to advocate in Salem. We're meeting with the governor here next week, a small group of us. In preparation for that, we're meeting tomorrow with the group of superintendents and to really relay the need to really look at our current service level to make sure that we're funded appropriately here in Oregon. As we begin the long session in January, I urge you as budget committee members, as board members, I know we will, to advocate for funding level that our kids need and deserve. It's not a current service level, it's a needed current service. It's a needed service level for our kids. A certain amount of money that our kids need. And it's something that I'm going to continue to press in Salem. And I know our board will continue to press in Salem. And we will urge our budget committee members to be involved in that as well. In terms of, as the long session begins, to really press in terms of what is the needed service level for our students across Oregon, not just here in Beaverton. So I appreciate your commitment to our kids, and I appreciate your time tonight. And I'm going to turn it over to, actually back to the chair. Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is our budget proposal presentation by Michael Schofield, who's our Associate Superintendent of Business Services, and Jessica Jones, our Budget Manager.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the time. Good to see you all here tonight. Appreciate the time and effort that you go through to see how we're doing on the budget process and how the budget's coming along. What you have, first I want to talk about roles and responsibilities. So primarily, what's our role in the administration? As the administration, we're charged with presenting the proposed budget to the committee, and that's what you have before you. I got a copy of it last week, and what that is the superintendent and the administration's best thinking about how to serve kids in the upcoming school year. So you have the superintendent's best thinking around that before you, put into columns and rows for your review. We use the district equity lens as we do throughout many processes that we use in this district. So want to make sure that we know we're centered around that. And after the budget message tonight and after tonight's meeting, we become an advisory role, an advisory capacity to the budget committee. We'll answer questions, share thoughts when asked, but we're really advising you as you move through the process of approving the budget and the school board later adopting the budget in June. What does the budget committee do? So you as a budget committee are going to approve appropriations, tax rates, and amounts. That's your primary job here. In terms of what you're doing, you're setting limits essentially for the district administration and on what we can spend and what areas. And it's at a really high level. We'll get into that a little later in the presentation. But it's appropriations are approved by fund and function. So we have this layout of fund, function, object, all the detail. But fund and function are the primary pieces. By fund, think the general fund, which is our operating budget, grant funds. We have a number of those that get consolidated, debt service funds, nutrition services, and the like. So different funding sources, and then we allocate it by major functional areas. So instructional, support services, and so on and so forth. So that's what you're doing, is approving those appropriation tax rates and amounts. In terms of how you operate as a public body, you're subject to public meeting laws and a simple majority on votes. And finally, on the last bullet here, you may discuss but not determine programs. One of the handouts you have at your station is the board policy around the purpose of the budget committee and the role. So again, we can discuss program, but we don't determine them. Determination of program happens both through the administration and through the school board. Your options for approval. You can approve the budget as it is proposed to you. You can increase the appropriation, the dollar amounts, because you think maybe we'll get more money. I don't think that'll be the case this time. We're not in a legislative session, but so our numbers should be pretty good and pretty tight around revenue, subject to enrollment, of course. But you could say, hey, we think we're going to get more money, and that's an option for the budget committee. You could decrease the appropriation. You could say that's too much. We're spending too much. We'd like to decrease the amount that we spend overall in the district, and the administration would have to go figure out how to do that, right? So, but those are your options as a budget committee. Approve as is, increase the appropriation, or decrease the appropriation. Presentation agenda tonight, you see a lot of stuff on this list in terms of what we're going to go over, and we've got a number of slides that we'll share with you tonight. But what we're really trying to do is take this big, thick book and condense it into a evening of a digestible format, so you can kind of see where we're going as a district in a big picture kind of way. All the details here if you want to dig into that, and Jessica and I love that part of the work, and we'll entertain folks that like to dig into that, but at the same time, others like to see it at a more high level, and so that's what we're going to try to accomplish tonight. We'll go over components of the budget, the general fund, so on and so forth, and we'll get down to the near the end. We'll have some public comment. We'll go over the committee questions and comments that you have as of tonight. You also have at your station the comments you've submitted and our responses to those. We won't go over those in the meeting unless you have follow-ups, but you have those before you as well. So let's get started. This is what the budget looks like. We have 12 funds. This is a $1.8 billion budget. Our general fund, our operating budget is just over $740 million for next year. Current enrollment is 38, just over 38,000 students. Our projected enrollment is down a little bit to 37,703 students next year. Again, I think we went over a little bit in Budget 101, but the demographics are shifting. Fewer babies being born, larger senior classes leaving. So that's primarily what's responsible for our enrollment decline at this point. It's pretty spot on and predictable in terms of number of births in Washington County and how that translates into students in kindergarten as they enter our system. Current state school funds $489.1 million. Next year it'll be $510 million. So that's the significant piece of our operating budget. Components we talked about a little bit a minute ago, but we have our general fund, special revenue funds, which include our grant nutrition services. That's where that SIA budget is. That the SIA was new back in 2019, 2020. So that's accounted for there. Our debt service fund, that's where we pay our debt service on the general obligation bonds, our pension bonds, and any other debt we have. Capital projects fund, as Dr. Balderas mentioned, that's where you'll see the costs of the new Beaverton High School and any other bond levy funded projects. You'll see those in the 400 funds. Enterprise funds, we don't have those in Beaverton. Internal service funds, those are insurance reserve and workers' compensation in our school district. And fiduciary funds, we don't have those in Beaverton either. So those are the big pieces of the components. Here's how it looks in a pie chart format. You see the two big pieces of the pie are our general fund budget and the capital budget. And over the next few years, that capital budget will actually decline a little bit, and that general fund will take a bigger and bigger share. But we've got a lot of work going out the door beginning this summer with Beaverton and with Raleigh Hills. So that's why that's such a big piece this year. And you see down the line all the other funds that are listed there as well. Building the budget, so I always like to share what kind of, again, from 30,000 feet in the air, how we build the budget. We start with our state school fund. That's our primary piece of revenue for our operating budget. And that is the average number of students enrolled during the school year. It's the higher of our current year projected or our immediate past year actual. So we've been getting paid the last few years on our immediate prior because our enrollment has been declining. And we'll show you some slides on that. There are additional weights in the system where we get additional weights for students in ESL, pregnant parenting programs, students on IEPs, district poverty data, and students in foster care. So we get so you have a student and their demographics are the two things that determine our overall weighted student enrollment, and then we get a dollar amount per student based on that. The local option levy, as Dr. Balderas mentioned, it's a property tax based. It's $1.25 per thousand and contributes a little over $40 million in teachers for Beaverton School District. The local option levy is difficult. It varies property by property. It's an oddball assessment in terms of how it works. So it's difficult to explain to people, but again, our community overwhelmingly approved it the last go around. So that was great. Beginning fund balance, we're going to talk about that. That's essentially our reserve funds, and it's the difference between resources and expenditures in the prior year. So wherever we land, it's that difference, and we'll go through that in a little more detail as well. Here's how that looks again graphically. State school funds, about 88% of our budget. Local option levy, again, not all districts have a local option levy. We do. That gives us that additional $43 million. And then all other sources are about $27 million. The all other sources are things like we get some money from our ESD and cash payments directly from them. We get interest earnings in the $9 million range, I think we'll earn on interest in this next go-around, and some other fees and those kinds of things that we collect. But that totals up to about $27 million. Here's how we build it on the expenditure side. We are a people-intense business. We have more people than you'd see in any kind of a manufacturing or other environment. We are people-intensive, and education is a people business. So where do we start when we're building the budget? We start with looking at our bargaining agreements, right? That dictates a lot of how we're going to pay folks during the school year. So what are we considering when we look at those bargaining agreements? We consider STEP. This is one of the organizations where you don't just have a standard salary. We have folks that, depending on their years of experience, come in at a different place on the salary schedule. And if they can advance up that salary schedule each year, they get that step. So that's something we need to consider. Cost of living adjustment, that's the percentage we would apply to the whole salary schedule. So we need to consider that as we build our budget. Professional development, what are the professional development pieces that we as a district not only want to provide for staff, but what is required that we provide to staff through their contract. Working conditions, people often don't think about it, but how much prep time teachers have matters in terms of what the cost is, right? Like, it's something we don't talk about a lot, but prep time's something we got to watch for in terms of what we have, because it does affect how we need to staff buildings and where kids are or are not with adults. So that we consider that. Benefits, of course, health insurance and others, and then leaves, sick, personal, and other kinds of leaves. So we're budgeting for substitutes. We don't get to just close a classroom down when somebody's sick. We're still going to teach kids. So the cost that we're dealing with there is in our substitute teacher experience. And then we get to the school level, we talk about staffing, and it's really an allocation of a number based on the number of students and the demographics of those students as well. We have a staffing allocation methodology we use in the district that helps staff all of our schools. Discretionary, there is some discretionary, it's allocation based on the number of students and their demographics as well. That's the stuff part of the budget that principals talk about. By the time they pay their copier bill and their paper bill, they usually don't have a lot of discretionary left over after that, but that's the discretionary piece. And again, we use the staffing allocation methodology. In terms of central departments like my office or the superintendent's office, support-based, how do we support the needs of our community and our schools? Very defined. Gus wants to know what we're spending money on. It doesn't roll over from year to year. If we have a specific project, like we're out looking at new ERP systems right now, that's a heavy cost. That'll be a budget line item in a year, but that number will go down over time. It doesn't just roll from year to year. Here's how expenditures looked. As I said, we're people business. You see our salary and benefit line are 88.5% of our budget. Pretty big slice of the pie for us. You can see all the other smaller components of the budget. I think the key takeaway is the slice there that's in purple. By the time we pay our people, keep the lights on, transport kids to school and do the necessary transfer and pay our charter schools, we've got about 6.2% of the budget left that we would kind of call in some way, shape, or form discretionary to the district. So not a lot of money, pretty heavily dictated on how we're going to spend money from year to year. Any questions so far? I'll keep rolling. Okay. Significant budget assumptions. It's based on a $10.2 billion state school fund. That's great this year. We know what our state school fund amount is, so we're not worrying about that. Next year when we're back at the table, we'll be guessing. The legislature does not have, at least not in the last several biennia, they haven't been able to get us a number by the time we are proposing and adopting the budget. So we're typically guessing what that state school fund amount is and hoping we're close. We know it this year, it's $10.2 billion. As Superintendent mentioned, we plan to spend $17 million of reserves down, and we'll show you some numbers on that in a little bit. Local option levy funds 301 teachers, about $44 million. And we've got money in there for summer school from ESSER. So ESSER is the federal relief funding we got during COVID. It is on its last legs and will be done September 30th, 2024. So we have made the moves we needed to move and move staff around in this budget. And we've allocated a few dollars this summer to run summer school and to take care of some maintenance projects. And we also got a state grant this year, about $1.5 million grant for summer school. So that's a good thing for us for summer school program. Additional pre-K program at a school. So that'll bring our total pre-Ks to a total of 14 programs. Expansion of dual language program, that continues. Multi-tiered system of supports, that was an ask in the budget process this year. We've got money budgeted for materials for that. Additional investment in maintenance, custodial supplies and materials. Again, how do we keep our schools healthy, clean, and safe? And if you look, the district adopted a strategic plan about a year ago in June, and you can see on the left-hand side where it says, under that significant budget modifications, the areas of the strategic plan goals and foundational building blocks that these budget modifications address. So you see foundations of success, progress on standards, and down the list. Total investment on these items is $2.3 million. Here's another big one, 73.6 FTE that were previously funded by ESSER are coming into both the general fund and the student investment account. So those positions, it's 30.2 licensed school-based positions, 25.4 social workers, 9.6 bilingual resource facilitators, and 8.4 teaching and learning staff positions. So those have all been brought in to the budget and will continue next year at an investment just under $10 million. This also maintains, the school board knows this, last fall we added paraeducators for kinder and for special education because of needs that were at that time, immediate needs at that time. So it's 42.9 kindergarten paraeducators, 4 newcomer supports, and 58 special education support staff. And again, an investment of about $7.7 million. Look at all this. I just keep saying invest. This is great. This is as good as it gets, folks. This is a great budget to present tonight. Invest 91.6 FTE added during the year. Again, we had some staffing allocation. That's the SAM. That's what SAM stands for, Staffing Allocation Methodology Adjustments. So we added 31.8 teachers and paraeducators in our special education and ELD programs. 39.4 classified staff for additional adult assistant paraeducators in our special education program. 13.4 bus drivers. The bus drivers are added to partially accommodate the time school start change that we've got coming next year. So that requires some funding there. 8 campus supervisors. That actually nets to 2.4 FTE because in the past we allowed our middle schools to at their discretion, trade an FTE for a campus supervisor. So they had been doing that. What we did this year is we made the SAM adjustment in SAM, and those people don't need to convert positions anymore. That's why the net is only at 2.4, if that makes sense. Okay? Investment of $7.6 million. Those are the major budget modifications. Now we'll get into the numbers a little more and share some graphics and actual columns and rows here in a second. This gives you the state school fund history and the projections and kind of where it's been and where it's headed. You can see the increases range from as high as 13.3% in a biennium to as low as 3.3%, which was the investment in 21-23. I will tell you that 21-23 biennium of investment of 3.3% was not enough to meet our needs that year. Right, like our costs were growing faster than, and remember, as we look at these are biennial increases, so it's a 2-year period. So a 3.3% increase over 2 years was not keeping up with what we experienced in cost during those years. And that's kind of starting to put us behind the 8 ball as we roll out into the out years. Even the 9.7%, when you think about what we gave for salary increases last year, a 4% cost of living increase. Steps were in there as well, and those range around 2%. So about half of our staff are eligible for steps. So right there, we're well over half of that 9.7% increase over 2 years. So we've got to work with our legislature to help better define the current service level for school districts and better appreciate those roll-up costs from year to year. Student enrollment, again, this shows it by weight, so it's, again, a graphical way for you to see it. You see our enrollment, our actual enrollment in 2020, 2021 in the green. You see our 37,703 that we're projecting for next year, so we've experienced some decline in enrollment. Demographically, you can see our ELL population's actually bumped up a little bit. Special education has gone down a little bit. Students in poverty, that's a determination that gets sent to us and told to us based on our geographic area. Had a little blip in 21-22, back up again and tailing off just a little in future years. And charter schools, their enrollments have remained flat across the years. Here's the little tiny numbers that we got to get into. Again, I think for those of you that were at Budget 101, you went through this and saw this, so I'm hoping it's not new, and hopefully, and the longer you're on the committee, the more familiar you'll get with this spreadsheet, because this is the one where we kind of boil everything in the general fund down to one piece of paper. So again, looking at the left, you see our resources, which start with our beginning fund balance. We have our state controlled, that's our state school fund and the property taxes associated with the state school fund. Our locally controlled dollars, that would be the local option levy and those other sources that we talked about earlier. That's the resource part of the pie. On the expenditure side, you see salary, benefits, everything else, and kind of where we fall at the end of each year. On the assumption side, again, our assumptions, we're based on the $10.2 billion. In the 25-27 years that we're projecting out for you, we're using a 9% increase. So if you go back to the slide a couple slides ago and say, what's it been growing at? I wouldn't say that's an aggressive estimate, and I wouldn't say it's pessimistic either. But 9% is the number we're using. If we get less than that in the next session, that makes these numbers look worse. If we get more than that, it'll improve those numbers down the road. Includes our most recent enrollment projections for 25-26, and then we flattened it in 26-27 and thereafter because we're hopeful that enrollment will pick up at some point. Doesn't include the SIA, high school success, or ESSER funds. This is, again, just our general operating budget. And as I always like to say, it's based on the best information we have at this time, right? So this is my one time a year where I get to say one thing I know about these numbers is they're not right. Right? I got the numbers. We've given you a projection. We think we're close, but in no way, shape, or form would we expect to be spot on with numbers that we're estimating out 3 years with all of the variables that go into this budget. So looking across, if you look at the 23-24 year, that's where we are today. That's what we're projecting. It's not our adopted budget anymore, but what we're actually projecting to spend and where we end this year. And we actually have a surplus this year. You see where we project for 2024, 2025 in terms of beginning fund balance. It rolls from the end of one year into the next year is the new beginning fund balance. You see our revenue that we have there, total resources of $740 million in 24-25, projected expenditures of just under $600 million. That produces a deficit of about $17 million in that year, and lowers our fund balance down from the 160 down to 143 million. As you, that 143, if you look at the very first number at the top of the 25-26 projection, that's where that number starts. It picks up there. And you see if we just continue operating programs, in year 2, we have a deficit of $37.8 million. Why does that deficit grow? Because we haven't done anything in 24-25 to fix it, right? So we've got a deficit of 17 million. We add in all the cost inflators on top of that, and that deficit grows to 37.8 million. If we close our eyes and end that year with 105 million and make no adjustments, we could start the next year with $105 million. Our deficit has now grown to just under $60 million in 1 year. That's where your CFO gets nervous, really nervous, because a $60 million 1 year deficit is too large. You're heading for a cliff, right? Like, you can't run deficits that high. So ahead of that, we'll have ways to try to smooth this out over time. So every year we'll get both the state school fund numbers, our enrollment numbers, and we'll monitor and adjust accordingly and give you projections out into future years. So 26-27, doing nothing, we would be in a pretty bad position. We'd be near the minimum of our reserve and headed for a much larger deficit with roll-up costs into the 27-28 year. So that's the big picture of the general fund. 24-25 is where we're focused. That $17 million deficit is there. We're comfortable with it because of the reserves that we have. It's something that, again, we'll look up again next year and say, all right, how do we do? Where are we at? What are we forecasting? And do we need to make any budget adjustments because of variable changes in variables from year to year? The long-term planning reserve is on the bottom line there. That's an amount that the board established when I first got to the district in 2019. They had used their reserves, and we're looking for a way to replenish that. And so we are on the path to reserve that in 23, 24. We think we'll have just over 31 million. It'll be pretty close to full to the 5% per board policy at the end of next year, or maybe into the subsequent year just a little bit. So we're getting close to having that reserve bucket filled. Questions on that? I know that's a lot of data, but hopefully that gives you the big picture of money and finance. Sure.
Something that was learning for me when I first came on the board was the piece of the 5% reserve that by policy former board members put that in after we had to have those huge cuts. And so that's what's kind of that reserve staying a little bit larger is what's also saving us right now. Unlike Portland Public and Salem Kaiser and many other districts are having cuts. So just wanted to point that out. That's part of our policy that a board 2012 put in.
It was actually in 2019 when I got here. I think
2019.
my first meeting, they said, we need a reserve policy and we need it now.
So
And
you
I said,
keep
"Okay."
thinking back to that board that put that forth so that we're not having cliffs for and trying to for our students and staff.
Thank you. So this next slide is just showing you graphically what you just saw in numbers. So if you're more of a visual person that likes to look at things graphically, you can see that the revenue is the blue line, expenditures are the red line. We've been below the blue line for a number of years. We will cross that line this year, where you'll see expenditures start to grow faster than our revenue over time. And as I've told our administrators when I share this same slide, we want that red and blue line to be friends. They need to stay close together at any given time. From a reserve standpoint, where are we at with reserves? In 2022, 2023, ending fund balance was higher than we expected. We got a pretty significant May surprise in terms of the number of students that had left the system statewide. And I know the board's had these discussions, we've had this discussion, but for the benefit of the budget committee, that caused our dollar amount we get per student to go up. And we got a pretty big correction in May last year, which is helpful to us. But again, number of students leaving the system statewide increases the amount we get per student and was helpful to our reserve balance. Also in the 23-24 budget that was adopted last year, for those of you that were here, we budgeted at 10.1 billion. It came in at 10.2 billion. So we had a little more leeway there in terms of a little more resource coming in than we had planned on and had budgeted. Again, that lower student counts is on the list there. And from our original ODE estimate in February 23 to the most recent in 24, nearly 7,500 student weights have left the system, or about 12,000 over 2 years. So the number of students in our system has continued to go down. And again, I think structurally, not surprisingly, it's not a Washington County issue. There was an article in Wall Street Journal last week about LA Unified School District and just their enrollment decline. It's a national phenomenon. In fact, it's an international phenomenon. There was another article about just the number of births on the entire planet going down and dropping about in half in the last 40 years. So we'll continue to live with that.
Go ahead, Susan.
So my question is about state revenue forecasts, and I know you track those, and I don't know if where they've been throughout the year and how that affects the school district.
They've been okay, flat and predictable. There is not a lot of new money not a lot of newer and higher and unanticipated tax money coming in right now. It's tracking pretty close to schedule from what the economists have projected. There is a forecast coming in a couple of weeks, so we'll be watching closely for that, and we watch that every quarter very closely. But no real surprises, but not what we just experienced, which was a lot of new money coming into the system for the state, causing that ginormous kicker that happened in the state, much larger than anything we've ever seen. So not that, but more stable, predictable revenues coming in. Thank you for that. Some other areas, just to give you the picture of that student investment account that we talked about, that we said is pretty important for our district. It's, 36 or $38 million, funds 274 positions in the district, and those are listed there just for your convenience. And we've tied the SIA goal. We have required goals within the SIA that we need to meet, and we've tied those in with our school district strategic plan as well. High School Success, similar, another grant-funded program that we got, I think it started in 2016 or 2017, somewhere back there, but it funds about 79 positions, and our award's about $12 million there. And again, tying it back to our strategic plan under College and Career Ready. When you get the slide deck from us, or a link to the slide deck from us, we've got these links that you can look at for any additional feedback you like that talks about our strategic plan, the equity lens, aligning for student success, the integrated guidance process, budget listing and learning video featuring Jessica. She goes through the budget piece, and then you'll see the staff feedback session we got on that. So when we give you the link to that, you'll have those resources if you want to check them out.
I just also wanted to point out to the budget committee that as a board, as a BSD board, one of the focuses that we have is to try to tie our expenditures to our strategic plan so that we're aligning what our community has put out as guideposts for where they want us to be over the next 5 years, and being really mindful of the decisions we make getting tied to that strategic plan. So.
That's why you see those, we've got those off to the side, or if you go through the superintendent's budget message in detail, you'll see on the financial highlights, we've tied those out to those, both the goals and some of the foundational building blocks.
I have a question about those funds. So you have to apply for those funds, right?
Correct.
How often do you have to go back? And
Every 2 years.
Every 2 years, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we'll be getting it started again here real soon.
So for clarification, next year?
Yes.
Just to make sure that was on mic, yeah.
Yes, sorry. Key takeaways, this is an interesting slide for me that I like to share that shows our enrollment in the green bar, and then going across, you can see our staffing. And so if you look at the top, you see our classroom teachers, you see all of our classified staff. You see that one's a good one to probably look at because it's got some significant change. It's got a pretty large bump going into next year. Those are those resources we talked about earlier where we said we added a bunch of paraeducators for kinder, special education and the like. That's why you see that number going up. Interestingly, not a lot of or much of this going down, but our enrollment's going down. So good resources for kids, lots of adults in buildings compared to even where we were just a few years ago.
Again, for the budget committee, the conversations we were having around the needs of our students with our students with special needs and our staff needing more support. So those are very focused expenditures of adding, trying to improve success at kinder and for our special ed students who qualify for special education. And as you saw earlier, that we're going to continue those that you pointed out when you were going through your slides too. That's nice.
Okay, key takeaways. So class sizes are budgeted at the same ratios that we had in the current year. So we have not increased class size, have not decreased class size, we've maintained them. Individual school staffing is affected by enrollment. So when people say, hey, the budget's fine, and it rolled forward, it's still enrollment based. So if we had enrollment declines in a school, staffing follows that. If we have enrollment increases in a school, staffing follows that. So there are changes on a school-to-school basis, but overall, you could see on the previous slide, same number of classroom teachers roughly than we had last year, and on down the line. From an overall budget standpoint, well, deficit spend, I showed you the numbers there and how quickly that begins to pile up if we don't keep an eye on it. So that's a key takeaway. Healthy reserves, based on low birth rates. Again, enrollment will continue to decline. ESSER ends in September, and we're ready for that. This budget anticipates that. And the state school fund's just not keeping up in terms of what they're giving us for increases. They're just not keeping up with what we need to fund our core operations. All right, I'm going to turn over to Jessica and be quiet.
Okay, so we're going to go over the budget document that you received. It's 278 pages, and so hopefully giving you some direction on some key pages to go through to kind of get the feel. And it is broken down into 4 sections, and it's the executive section, our organizational section, our financial section, and our informational section. Inside that informational section, I'm going to start there because if you haven't noticed so far, we do like our acronyms, and there's a glossary in there on page 271 that includes definitions as well as acronyms that are used throughout the document. So to start with our executive summary, this is something that we do pull out and we can lift it out of our document, and it's 15 pages. It'll give you the general feel for what's going on in our budget at a very, very high level. It starts out with the superintendent's budget message, which is where I would recommend that we start, page 3, and includes very summarized data beyond that. Moving into our organizational section, this talks about our district structure and our departments, our school board, administrative staff. What we added in the 2023-24 budget was department pages, which provides some extra information about each of our individual departments and what we're doing, what our goals are, significant changes or new initiatives that have been put into place. So we continue that. This is just kind of what it looks like. If you are familiar with our budget document, they were modeled after our school one-page documents that are in our informational section. And so they were put in last year, and we've just made some improvements to them this year. In the financial section, this is really what takes up the bulk of that budget document that you have there. All of my rows and columns of the numbers. And so we're not going to go through everything here. These are the page numbers for all of these things. At the beginning of each fund, we do an overview. It talks about what kind of activities happen in each of the funds and what the revenue sources are and expenditures and different trends that we are seeing in each of those. I wanted to point out that our variance analysis is a budget-to-budget comparison. It is not a proposed budget to where the projected 23-24. It goes back to our adopted budget. So we are looking at how does it differ from what we adopted last spring. And then the last one there that I'm going to point out is our capital projects fund. This one is getting more information as we move along through our bond program, and this year we were able to add a summer activity map, which is really interesting. It shows the district and the projects that are going on all over the district that is funded by our bonds. And finally, in our informational section, it has a lot of information. The first one up there is our ratio teacher staffing by school, which is really important. That is all of our classroom teachers and how our staffing allocation methodology places those teachers based on the funds that we have available. So we have our general fund, our local option levy, and our student investment account. If you skip down to about halfway down that page, we do include the full staffing allocation methodology, which is about 25 pages of how we fund all of our schools at all levels. It is broken down into elementary, middle, high school, and options. And followed up with that, there is special education and our ELD staffing. And right behind that are those school summary pages, which is a really good resource if you're looking at a particular school. It gives a little history of what's going on in that school, what the budget looks like. It has staffing information, demographics, financial information, and some other graphs and charts related to that school. And that is all I have on the budget document. As you go through as we prepare for our next budget meeting, any questions related to that, feel free to send those through, and we will get to you on those. And right now, we're going to pause and take any questions or comments that you have as a committee.
Committee, any questions? I also want to recognize Diane. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute or raise your hand. We'll keep our eye out. Any questions from the committee?
I have one.
I'm going to Jessica and then Lisa.
Just for the sake of transparency for our community, can you talk about the number of dollars that are going for the youth services program? There's been some chatter about it, and I know it's a line item, it's not exactly a line item in the budget, and I'd like to
Right.
make that really clear on the record.
Right. So youth services, our estimate for next year is about $750,000. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa?
I have a question about the capital projects fund. So, and just the mechanics of the bond, the funds that are generated by the bond. By definition, do those go into does that go into the capital projects fund? And then do they stay there, or do they ever get reallocated out of that fund?
They stay with them. So we sell bonds and take those proceeds and any interest earnings that we invest on that, and it stays with the capital projects fund. And our hope is always that we can end up doing more than our bond promise with those funds. But yes, stays with capital and stays there forever. Doesn't get moved on to program or other areas.
Other questions from the committee? Yes. Sunita?
Yeah, thank you. The summer school programs, I noticed that the funding was going down per the grant fund, but there's money allocated from the ESSER fund and the ODE. So is the total funding going to go down, or is it going to stay same, or?
ESSER's going down, right? Like this year, we're spending 22 million or so, and that 22 million is not available for next year. It'll be down to, I think we have about 10 million left in ESSER, and some of it's going to be summer school, and the other's going to be for some HVAC projects. And that'll be gone in September. So that's why you're seeing the overall dollars in grant funds going down, because we've had a couple years of $20+ million of ESSER that's gone.
Is there any chance that we can get funding from somewhere else for the summer school programs?
Oh, summer school? We'll run summer school with ESSER this year for next year. The year after that, we've got to solve that. We might get some funding from the state of Oregon for it, but we won't necessarily count on that. And they've been late to the party telling us when we get funding. So it's been hard to plan and get a program out the door on short notice. So we'll have to have a plan for summer school when we come back to the budget committee next year.
Yeah, one more question. I know you answered that when we talked about it in the strategic investments. There was one item that we have been reporting on was not there, the behavioral health and wellness team expenditures. I know that ESSER is going away and that funded us quite a bit, but from what we talked about, there won't be a drop in the funding. It's a review year next year, right?
Yep, the funding's in place, the
Funding
staffing's
is
in
in-
place, but we're reviewing it this year. We're not putting it on the long term. We have some specific investments that we're going to measure, and they're included in the budget document, that we're going to measure over the next several years to see how those investments are working or aren't working based on some measures that have been established. That used to be one. It isn't one because it's changed so dramatically over the last few years. So that'll be a program that'll get reviewed in the coming year.
So if somebody wants to see how much funding is going for that, where would we see that in the budget?
A lot of it lies in the SIA.
SIA,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So as we begin to develop our SIA in the next round, that'll be when we'll be looking at that.
Yeah, and thanks for giving me the expenditures for music program. That's good to know that it's not going down or anything. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Agana.
Thank you, Mike, Gus, and Jessica. I'm looking at the significant budget modifications, and I'm happy to see that special education support is part of the areas where we have the significant budget modifications. I'm just wondering, what did we allocate? Do we have the numbers that we allocated for special education last year? Do we readily have that information available? If not, that's fine.
Yeah, part of it's, we've kind of laid it out in terms of what we have listed for you. The 58 special education supports, that 58 FTE, that was that part of that, what we added right away last fall. And then as we look forward to next year, we increased it by a couple of adjustments. One was through the staffing allocation methodology adjustments. So we made adjustments to the program there that added special education staffing there. And another was this additional adult assistance area of 39.4. So I don't have just the sped pulled out on the SAM adjustments, but we can get that for you.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Thank
And then my next question is regarding mental health support for our students. We have heard from our community members how important it is that we allocate enough funds for that. Did we put that into consideration when we're making this proposal?
Yeah, one of the things that was important to the superintendent was that we maintain those for another year. And remember, we had 70-some ESSER positions. A lot of those, I think 26 or so of those were school social workers that are part of that BH&W team. We've moved those into either the general fund or SIA staffing. So all those supports have remained in place for next year.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Susan?
To talk to the mental health, which is a major concern of mine. I think that the local level, it's difficult to support mental health, and that we need to be advocating at the state level that they fund a separate fund for mental health support in our schools statewide, because it's such a major issue in our state. I just want to put that out there, because as we look at our budget, if we continue to and you know how important this is to me, but if we continue to fund the mental health out of our general fund budget, it leaves less for teachers in the classroom. So that's a balance, and I just want to make sure that we're looking ahead and advocating at the right place.
Yeah, I agree with that. In fact, just before this meeting tonight, I was talking to the chair of the Quality Ed Commission, saying, I'm looking forward to your document that's coming out where they revised the QEM. What they've got in mental health supports in their model school is not adequate, right? I think it's 1 FTE or something like that in their model school. So we need to keep talking to those folks that are in those positions and reminding them that there's not enough there.
And this is an issue that is, or the state of Oregon has underfunded mental health for multiple years, and we're in a crisis. And I wish we could say that we could fix it at the school level, but this is because it's been underfunded for so many years. It's a statewide crisis, and our kids are the most at risk at this point. So, that's why I'm speaking so passionately about what we need to do.
I think it's a perfect storm across the state of Oregon with the loss of ESSER dollars, with ESSER dollars sunsetting this September, this fall, and budgets being stretched. So it's a perfect storm, I think, for schools, because I think schools have gone dependent on our ESSER dollar positions across the state, but across the country. And I think with those going away, I think you're going to see a great impact in our public schools. So I agree. And Susan, this has been talked about with superintendents in terms of how lobbying, have possibly another categorical come out of Salem that looks to support mental health for our schools and our kids.
I want to be mindful of time right now. Are there any last 1-2 questions? Go ahead and Justice, and then Jessica, and that will be, or okay as well. Tammy. Justice.
Thank you, and hopefully this will be quick. One, I was wanting to ask, and it's a rollback to the key takeaways around like school-based staffing, and that our allocation, we had the bump that caused the surplus last year, if I understood correctly, because the amount allocated, then we had less students, so then we had higher per student. Would your expectation, or does this reflect the expectation that the state would then adjust what's allocated going forward to not allow that to happen again? Or is the idea that, because I think people can make the logical jump, like, oh, we'll have less kids, so it'll be more money. But I just want to make sure we get that out there.
I'm with you. We're watching that on both sides in terms of making sure that we continue to advocate for an adequate funding level for K-12 in the state school fund, and making sure that ODE is keeping up with the number of students on a district-by-district basis and adjusting the overall state school fund more rapidly than they have, in terms of, and a little more accurate.
But we have heard about that correction, though, but we have heard about that possible correction as a state with less kids. Why are we giving you so much, so should we reduce the funding? That is a narrative out there in Salem.
My brain. And then the second one, this is maybe something I know it wouldn't be, I don't know how much it would show up in this process if it was a part, but our budget doesn't reflect any like individual like PTOs or fundraising, things that school sites may be doing to change what's happening at their buildings. But I think it's something significant that I would like to understand in terms of what we're spending, if there's other things being supplemented, kind of like off our books.
Yeah.
Right, because that's changing what kids are experiencing building to building. And I don't know how we account for that, but that's an issue that is noodling in my head.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit about that in terms of fundraising and what goes on in that area.
Okay, Jessica and then Tammy.
Okay, I've got a couple questions, and this one's like a little bit of a programming one. But I'm wondering, as far as like strategic investments, and you're talking about measures for effectiveness, do you have that for all programs for line items?
No, not every single program. Like, we don't have a general class size, let's measure it every year and make that determination. We've seen studies, right, like long-term studies, but that would be something where I would say that's a very big, significant investment that we have in this district that we don't have specific measures for, and we don't. So the ones we have listed are the ones we intend to measure, because we think we've identified measures that will lead to good information and how to determine outcomes as we look for more of those decisions in the future.
Okay, thank you. And then, do you have a specific ask for the legislature for the state school fund?
No, I know we've got, I don't think we've begun the legislative agenda process work, but we haven't coalesced around a number yet. I'm working with my colleagues all over the state right now to work on what that current service level roll-up number ought to be. In fact, I think in a week or two, Gus, you voluntold me to be on a committee that I'm going to participate around the legislature. So we're getting into that just now.
Okay, last but not least, Tammy,
Hey,
you get the
so
final
I just
question.
want to acknowledge that school board members, anyway, I'm not sure if the budget committee members also received emails about the SRO program, and I want to, say, it's really, this is a challenging time to make program changes, but I want to honor their concerns and wonder if, in this next 6 weeks or so before we approve the budget, if there's an opportunity for conversations around what we could do that could make this program more palatable to the community groups that express significant concern about that. Right now isn't that time. Next budget meeting, potentially not that time, but maybe we can construct a space where we can hear from the community. I don't see us swapping SROs for social workers. That's really not what is possible at this point. But, what is possible? Is there an opportunity for setting up an oversight committee that can help address some of those concerns? So want to acknowledge that those emails from the community members, and I'm open. I think we're all open to hearing like what can change, because I know that a lot of the community members have strong feelings about that, and it's challenging for us to sit here and know that that's the case, but also know that we have to approve this budget. So just wanted to acknowledge that. Thanks.
Thank you, and that it's not the purview of the budget committee to make those changes, but yes, to honor.
Good board discussion.
Yeah. We are going to move ahead. Thank you for all the questions. I know we received a couple of written public comments online. Do we want to start with those or start with?
Yeah, we can do that. So in your packet, you've got the written public comments that we've received. I think we have 4 of them. And as you mentioned, Dr. Carpenter, some YSO, a couple of those in there, but feel free to read those. We just wanted you to know we got 4 comments about the budget, and those are the 4 comments that
Okay.
we received. So go ahead and check those out, and then we will quickly switch over to live testimony.
Great. And thank you to those who submitted public comment online. The Budget Committee will be reading and considering those. Tonight, we have 9 individuals for public comment. The Budget Committee has set aside time for live public comments, and please plan to limit your comments to no more than 2 minutes. The Budget Committee will not hear charges or complaints against any district employee. District employees and board members cannot be named specifically during testimony. If a commenter names a staff or board member once, they will be asked to refrain from doing so again. If they name a staff or board member again, their testimony will be ended. Budget Committee members will listen to the commenter only. Budget Committee members will not comment or ask questions. We have received 9 requests to provide public comment this evening. And here to speak first, I'm going to call 3 of you to speak. First up, Filson Omer. And then Maiza Iman, you can come up, all 3 of you can come up to the table. So that was Maiza Iman and Jamila Osman. And we'll start with Filson. Thank you for being here tonight.
It's a pleasure for having me. So as a student at Westview High School and a leader of the MSA on my campus and a track field athlete, I am here today because I'm confused about the fact that the school district is going to pass a budget that allocates $750,000 to police. As a student leader, I have repetitively been asked to be part of communities and focus groups about policing in schools. I have repeatedly been asked to share my opinions and perspective. My question is, why was I asked to share my opinions if they were not going to be taken into consideration when creating this budget? This feels like a waste of my time and energy. It feels like a lack of respect for my thoughts and feelings as a student in this district. Every student of color that you'll talk to will tell you that the police do not make us feel safe or comfortable in schools. We feel monitored and watched. We feel like we're being treated like criminals when we're forced to interact with school officers. We are young and we don't have the power to be decision makers. So we're asking you as decision makers who make choices that affect our lives and futures to please think about us when you create these budgets and take our concerns seriously. We do not want police in our schools. They do not make us feel safe. And if you want us to believe in ourselves, then you have to believe in us when we're telling you this kind of learning environment will not help us. We want $750,000 to go to mental health services, social workers, and counselors, and not to the police. Fund our futures and not to school prison pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you. Maiza?
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm a student at Westview High School. I'm having a good school year after a difficult time in middle school where I experienced the harm of policing in school firsthand and unfair disciplinary action by school and district. I'm not just a number or a plot point on a graph. I'm a student who was made to feel intimidated and afraid. I was made to feel like I didn't belong. I was made to feel like there was no one to stand up for me and advocate for me. I was made to feel like I wasn't a problem to be solved instead of a student to be helped. SRO didn't make us feel safe. Having police officers at school makes me and my peers feel intimidated and uncomfortable. It creates a sense of surveillance rather than supportive environment for learning. To have $750,000 dedicated to the SRS creates the opposite of a supportive and safe learning environment for me and students like me. Do our voices and our lives matter to this school district? Despite what I've been through, despite the harm and the hurt I experienced, I hope they do. I hope you will take my voice into consideration and vote against this proposed budget.
Thank you. And next up, Jamila.
Thank you all for having us here, and thank you for your service to the district. I'm a Beaverton School District graduate and a former Beaverton School District employee. I'm here as a concerned community member. Those of us who are here to testify today recognize that this is not the ideal time or place to be expressing our concerns about the money being allocated to SROs. And to that, I offer that it is a tenet of white supremacist and dominant culture to be invested in procedures and rules at the expense of community and connection. We've had little to no avenue to share our voices or testimonies or input, which is why we are here today. We have sent email after email. This process has felt incredibly undemocratic to large swaths of our community. And since equity is one of the core pillars of the district, I'm sure that I don't need to explain the difference between intent and impact. And as an equity practitioner, I offer you two questions: who benefits from this proposed budget and who is harmed by it? We are alarmed by the allocation of $750,000 towards SROs, despite the fact that very little of the reforms suggested by the Sea Change report have been implemented. I don't need to list all of the data and research that shows the reality of the school-to-prison pipeline or the district's own shameful data regarding the disparities for Black and Brown students when it comes to discipline outcomes. It is clear that data does not necessarily move the district, and so it is my hope that you will be moved to act on behalf of your own stated values, to engage the community in a drawn-out process with the stated intention of soliciting our feedback and our expertise, only to then disregard all of that is not how you build community connections. We show care for and commitment to our community. Those are your words, not mine. We ask you to demonstrate that care and that commitment to the community by refusing to pass the budget until there is a clear and explicit plan for the creation of a community oversight committee, in addition to many of the other recommendations made in the Sea Change report. Thank you.
Thank you. The next three for public comment: Farah Mahmoud, Idil Mohammed, and Faranaz Rahman. You can all three come up to the table. We'll start with Farah.
Good evening, and again, thank you for your service. My name is Farah. I'm here tonight as a parent of a Beaverton School District student and also as a former budget committee member. I'm here today to express my concerns for the next year's budget. I am a community advocate who spends a lot of time interacting with some of the most marginalized families in our district. We are asking you to implement the proposals of the Sea Change report in a real and a meaningful way so that all of our students can belong, believe, and achieve. To the school board members in this room, most of you run on a platform championing equity. You promise to be our voice, the voice for our students and our communities in exchange of our votes. I hold you to that promise that you made. The district discipline data shows that racial disparities and inequities are rampant. Research shows how policing makes those existing disparities worse. My personal experience as an advocate for students who have been pushed out of the schools in our district and funneled into the prison industrial complex supports that research. We ask you to vote against this proposed budget and vote in line with the district's stated value and use these funds to invest in restorative justice practices and programs that will heal our community and our students. A budget document is a value document. We ask you to put your money where your value is. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Idil?
Yeah, hi. Thank you all for having me, and thank you all for the work that you do. I'm a BSD graduate with siblings in the district, and by career, I'm also a researcher and data analyst. And today, I'm here as a concerned community member over the budget and the resources that are being allocated to SROs. I know from my time in school that SROs never made students feel safe. We always felt overly watched and uncomfortable in their presence, and rebranding what you call police in schools by calling them SROs or YSOs is not the same as reckoning with their purpose and their function in schools, both historically and in the present day. The fact that community voices nor the Sea Change Report recommendations were taken into serious consideration when putting together the budget is extremely concerning. As people who claim to be champions of equity, this budget makes those claims feel hollow. It does the opposite of providing a safe and equitable place to learn for all students. As a data analyst, I'd like to flag that the report itself cannot be taken as gospel on the community's needs and concerns. Collecting data in communities with fractured relationships and broken trust with the district poses its own challenges and will undoubtedly skew the story that the data is telling. And so I'm here today to ask you all to vote against this budget and to take your students into account. You don't sit here to platform your own political and personal ideologies, right? You sit here to advocate on behalf of every single student in the district according to your strategic plan. The students have spoken. Do you hear them? Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And next up, we have Farnaz.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Farnaz. I'm from Zone 4. I'm also a facility planning committee member. This is my first year, so I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for being here and presenting your budget discussion. I would like to address here very similar topic, which is about safety of our students in schools here in Oregon, also across the country. But let's focus on what's really happening here in schools. The presence of the SRO is actually having a lot of negative impacts on our Muslim students, especially. They're losing their there's a lack of trust and also safety. And because of the trust and lack of safety, the things are getting worse. And also because of the current situation that is happening right now, the genocide and ethnic cleansing in Gaza, the students are not feeling even safer. They are being punished for being open about their political opinions in schools or colleges, and also for wearing their cultural clothing. There is no specific official recommendation for what is the criminal offense or not the criminal offense, and what should be done in that process, or what would be the protocol. So there is a gap of knowledge happening here between the school students and the staff, and that gap needs to be recovered, which is very important to have educational programs which is proper and vital for the students and going to be very productive, as I believe. And also because of the unsafe situation and crisis going on, the student enrollment is also decreasing over the a lot of past years, and we take a look at that. So I would like to say the same thing, that please do something about the budget, that so then we can have proper programs and for our students, and we can also have safe atmosphere for all the students. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And next up for public testimony, Cayman Minor, Barbie Minor, and Sydney Jockers. Sydney, I meant to call your name first. So Sydney, if you would like to go first. Then Cayman can go first if he would like to.
I don't care. Testing 1, 2. Okay, thank you. I'm going to read my statement here. Good evening, members of the board and fellow community members. My name is Cayman Minor. I'm here not just as a coach, but also as a concerned parent and community member regarding the $750,000 proposed for school officers. Any true safety in our schools is appreciated thanks to our dedicated educators and staff. They create a nurturing environment that is crucial for learning, not through sometimes available officers. Research from reputable sources like the ACLU, NYU, Steinhardt indicates that the presence of school resource officers has led to a troubling increase in arrests for minor misbehaviors typical of youth. This approach disproportionately affects our students of color and those with disabilities, leading to negative impacts such as loss of instruction and time and emotional distress. Given these findings, I urge you to reconsider the allocation of these funds. Investing in mental health services, educational aids, and extracurricular activities would be a more effective and beneficial use of resources. This approach not only aligns with our community values, but also supports our children's development in a more positive and meaningful way. When operating at a deficit, I'm sure you're able to find a much better use of these dollars. I trust we all share a common goal of truly safeguarding our children's future and ensuring they thrive. Thank you.
Barbie, you're up next. Good evening, members of the school board and BSD Budget Committee volunteers. Thank you for your tremendous advocacy you do on behalf of our students and community. Determining how to allocate funds to best support our children and teachers is truly some of the most important work to be done by the board. First, as I personally know many of you, I would like to be explicit and state that my testimony offered tonight represents my personal views and not in any way relating to an elected capacity. I am a proud Beaverton School District mother, my daughter having graduated from Southridge High School just last year and now attending Brown University, and my son will be a freshman at Southridge this fall. Tonight, I'm asking for you to reconsider the $750,000 funding allocation for school resource officers and redirect those dollars towards mental health support for our students. Studies have proven time and time again, the data is clear, SROs in schools disproportionately affects minority students, especially Black and Hispanic students. On the homepage of BSD's website, under Our Promise is a quote from Superintendent Dr. Balderas, quote, "We're committed to eliminating the structures, policies, and practices that perpetuate inequalities in our schools," end quote. How is it that the district can allocate almost $1 million to fund a program that is in direct conflict with removing practices that perpetuate inequalities? How can the district hear from so many underrepresented communities against SROs and continue to ignore their calls for change? Over the past year, you've heard from testimony from students, families, and community-based organizations advocating to dissolve the SRO program. There seems to be a disconnect between the stated values of the district and the demonstrated actions of the district. I realize tonight's meeting is a budget meeting, not a policy meeting. However, these two cannot happen without the other. In order to execute policy, you have to fund the policy. I'm urging you to reconsider the $750,000 YSO allocation and leverage those dollars to fund more counselors and mental health providers. I'm asking you to live the district's values by approving a budget that funds student well-being, not over-policing. Thank you for your time and consideration. Thank you, Barbie. And yes, Sydney.
My name is Sid Jockers. I'm a 2023 graduate of Westview High School, and I have been an active participant in the community for the past 19 years. I'm not sure if you remember me, but about a year ago, I was sitting in the same room urging school board members to step up and listen to students' opinions and value their voices in the SRO conversation. I am angry. I am exhausted. I am tired of being polite. Sorry. This new proposed budget, oh my God, of $750,000 going towards SROs is blatantly ignorant. Y'all read the Sea Change report last year and learned absolutely nothing. I am tired of watching my taxpayer dollars going towards more police in schools and not helping the serious mental health crisis that we are all experiencing. I personally experienced a mental health crisis in high school, and I did not run to an SRO. I ran to a counselor. Trust me, I wish police officers were the solution because you all seem to be so obsessed with the idea of it being that easy. But unfortunately, your job requires you to work and fight a little harder, but that is the job you signed up for. So I come here today, a year later, begging and pleading you to listen to your community members. Not only do we all have a catastrophe of the world at our fingertips, but we also have to sit and watch the people who promised that they would protect us, lie, and manipulate us into hope. The suicide rates are at an all-time high. It hurts me to know that so many of my peers are experiencing extreme suicidal ideation, and y'all sit up on your prestigious chairs and want to give more money to the police officers? Clearly, you have failed us in our community, but you have an opportunity to try again. Wake up, do your job, and for the love of God, please listen to what your community is advocating for. Thank you.
Thank you to those of you who came for public testimony tonight, public comment. Next up on our agenda is a summary for our May 28th meeting by Jessica.
Actually, I'm going to let Mike take this one. I'll take the next slide.
Okay.
Okay, next steps for us, for the administration, what do? We continue with staff bargaining. We're in bargaining with both our licensed, we have a full bargain open with our licensed employees, and we have a economic opener with our classified employees. So we're working towards that. As we mentioned earlier, based on Jessica's question, we'll be working on our legislative agenda as we get look forward to the long session next winter and spring. And for you as a budget committee, receive and review public input. And what we really need to know between now and May 28th is what questions you have so that you're prepared to vote on May 28th to approve the budget. From a timeline perspective, again, May 28th is when we meet, and then it goes to the school board after that for budget adoption. So next meeting is May 28th. I think it's 5:45 time period again. And I will let you know that I will make myself available for any comments, questions, or feedback you might need answered. We certainly want you to feel, excuse me, I'm choking. We want you to feel comfortable that when you come into that meeting on May 28th, you're prepared to vote. I got a frog in my throat. So whatever you need between now and the 28th, use the link form that we have provided for you to provide any questions you have or any follow-up. You can email me directly. If you need to set up meeting time, we're happy to do that as well. I think that's all I have on next steps.
Okay, now for our next meeting, which is on May 28th, which is the Tuesday after Memorial Day, we will bring back information about the special education staffing allocation changes. I also wanted to note in our informational section on the slide that I provided, I didn't actually highlight it, but the page numbers are provided for you. On pages 165 through 166, we have positions where you can see their job titles, and you can see what we have looked like in actual staffing over the last 3 years, as well as the current year budget compared to the next year budget. But we will bring back a summary of the special education staffing allocation methodology changes. And we will also bring back some information regarding fundraising and PTOs and how that affects our budget that has been proposed to you. And any other questions that you submit on our link, if you reach out, email, call, as Mike just said, we will be available to you for the next couple of weeks so that we can make sure that you're ready to go on the 28th. At the meeting on the 28th, we will have the minutes from today's meeting ready for you to approve. And we will also be looking to approve the budget and the tax levies at that meeting.
And if I could just make a comment about the questions that already came in, we have those in our packet, so please reference those because there are some that are relevant. Well, they were all of our questions, so please review those in advance of next meeting and definitely ask questions. If you have questions, either Michael, submit more questions, ask your chairperson from your zone, right, or your board member from your zone if you've got questions. Okay, is that what, that's it for the summary?
That's it. And we're
Fabulous.
ready, we're
So-
ready if you need any extra time, we can make time for that as well.
We're going to end with Dr. Balderas.
Just really quickly, just appreciate your time and energy this afternoon, this early evening, and just ask questions. We'll make ourselves available for any of your questions you have prior to the next meeting, and appreciate your dedication to the kids in our district. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And this meeting